So I will start now.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for connecting. So today, this is the presentation of the Embodied Interface project, a project that we developed with Xianyun Huang and with the support of the National Culture and Arts Foundation from Taiwan. And of course, thanks to all the willingness of this group of artists that have joined us. Before going directly to presenting the project and the artworks, there are some technical aspects that we need to let you know. Firstly, this webinar is being recorded and streamed through our YouTube channel as well. And as we are in the webinar mode, you will be muted and you will be able to listen only to us, the speakers, and the team of artists. We'll have time to ask questions and comments, and we appreciate it if you share that through the chat section from the Zoom. And we will also try to pay attention to the comments that appear on YouTube, but we need to give priority to the ones here in Zoom. As also, we recommend you to select the speaker view or lecture mode, so you only see the people who are speaking or performing in the moment. And we recommend you to use headphones, as you will be able to better appreciate sounds of the artworks and hear people speak. As for the schedule of the webinar, it has 3 parts. First, we will present the Embodied Interface project, and then we will go to see the artworks from the artists that have joined us, Thiago Hersan, Ronald, and Yuki Kobayashi. Finally, we will hold a discussion among the group of artists and open up the room for Q&A with the audience. We invite you to write your questions in the language you prefer among Chinese, Spanish, and English, and we'll make our best to translate. We have designed this webinar to last 2 hours and no more, and we will make our best to keep with this timing. I leave you now to one of the curators of the project, who is Xianyun Huang, to introduce the main ideas and research.
Hi, everyone. First of all, I want to thank the National Culture and Arts Foundation in Taiwan for supporting the project and for creating this specific funding in response to COVID-19, which allowed such international collaboration. And actually, Daniela and I started to discuss the issues of online curating during the outbreak of COVID-19, in which it appeared as if all the institutions were migrating for the first time or discovering something completely new in relation to art and networks. However, we think that the shift to online platforms or internet-based artworks was already happening in the 80s when the internet was just starting to be available. So Daniela and I were curious to find out the context we live in. So also at the time, I think we both were really doubting the very notion of online curating, because we don't think that by merely putting things online on a website, it is immediately legitimate to call this an online exhibition or curation. And we were also discussing that, is it even meaningful to use the term online exhibition? So because the infrastructure that the internet can provide us is radically different from the exhibitions curating in art and cultural institutions or commercial galleries. So one might say that to some degree, the internet contains an anti-institutional potentiality, and it can be used as democratic medium and also foster like open source or open spirit internet culture that we can see nowadays. Although it is debatable, because there are also negative aspects and limitation of internet culture you can find. And so for this discussion, you can find out more on our YouTube channel, where we have more discussions around this issue. And also the other important aspect that we were discussing is like how an artist can turn the language of UI, that is a user interface of website, into an artistic language, so that it is not just using the website as like a neutral medium, but a critical protocol, and make the whole website from the appearance to infrastructure and possible interaction as an artwork itself. So this is why like this line of thought led us to research net art in the 1980s, where some of the artists were already critically thinking how to integrate internet into artworks or create in dialogue with this changing technical environment. And when we are researching, I think we find it really interesting that sometimes there are some net artworks are not so user-friendly for people, but this is because they intentionally provide ways for meta thinkings and critique of internet culture. So for now, I'm going to give a brief introduction of this specific term net art, that it's very specific term referring to a specific period, but in this project, we are more interested in using a broader definition that can also connect to the current situation. And here I would like to quote Josephine Bosma's idea in her wonderful book, Net.art's Last Talk Net Art. Okay, she argues that, I quote, net art is art based in or on internet cultures. These are in constant flux. Net art spaces in internet cultures means that a physical, like hardwired or wireless connection to the internet is not necessary in individual net artwork. A net artwork can exist completely outside of the net. End of quote. In this book, Bosma explores net art from an anti-movements, anti-history perspective. Bosma also rebels against the notion of medium specificity, which focuses only on emphasizing the specificity of net art and includes other possibility. So Daniela and I are not interested in the specific era in art history. We are researching a kind of art history that is nonlinear and relational. And we believe that there's no one origin of one art movement. And here, Bosma also states, I quote, that net art is not a movement, it is more a transition and ongoing evolution of the practice and reception of art culture, as well as science and academia, which was stimulated by the advent of new network technologies, end of quote. So in this project, what we are discussing here has shifted from the specific art historical era of net art into the mutual influence of art creation and internet culture. So we also discuss like the co-generative process of making art projects and beyond, such as ideas of platforms, accessibility, and commons. To sum up, we hope that we do not limit ourselves in the Eurocentral history, and it is our hope to bring people from different regions and also using the broader definition of net art. So this leads to our concept of curator decision that Daniela will explain for us now.
So thank you, Senyun. So just to briefly say that as curators with an academic background for Senyun and myself, it was very relevant to start from this research section within which we looked at net art produced by artists from Latin America and Taiwan. Our aim has been to weave these historical narratives that have been already written, but most of the times considered as peripheral or marginal in relation to the origin of net art in Europe. For this part of the project, it was essential to talk with artists related to what has been considered at the core of the so-called origin of net art, like Brian Mackern from Uruguay, who is joining us today, and Ćosić from Serbia and Slovenia, who's also joining us. To get closer to the aim of understanding a more complex development of art related to networks, it was also very important to look at contributions from researchers from Taiwan and Argentina, and the text presented in Brian Mackern's book of the database that we will talk a little bit more afterwards. And as Senyun mentioned, also Josephine Bosma. All this more like research part, we have shared it in our YouTube channel in some videos, and we are happy to share more information, bibliography with you. We have explored artworks created also by Taiwanese artists like Xu Li Xing's net artwork Brandon and Li Mingwei's net artwork Male Pregnancy. After that, in another stage, we put the term of net.art into play with the artists which we invited to create an exchange together with, who are Thiago Hersan, Ronald and Yuki Kobayashi, who are also joining us today. And this experience of exchanging discussions and ideas and sharing the process of creation with the artists has been also one of our curatorial wheels. The artists participating in the project come from heterogeneous backgrounds, interests, and regions. This was important for us when approaching the explorations and interactions about art and technology, and we specifically wanted to work with artists whose mainly focus on their physically body and are used to perform offline, and invited them to evoke discussions on the comparison of online and offline performance. For us, it was also relevant to explore these notions with artists, exploring the affective possibilities of technology and communication. One last comment is that we have learned a lot about the challenges of working as a team strictly through the internet, because we're all spread out in different parts of the world. We've also learned its potentialities, its limitations, and we have many times realized the much greater flexibility and power of our imagination, and encountered limits when putting those imagined ideas to work through the internet platforms. We have encountered the confusion of working in different time zones and testing live streams that create delay. But with and apart from all those conditions, we have confirmed the importance of humans willing to work and create in collaboration, and in the spirit of the net artists, we embrace the possibility to do that through the internet platform. I will very briefly present everyone who has been part of the project, but please visit our website or the artist's personal website, which we have included in the chat section, so that you can see more about their artwork and more about them. So to start with, Thiago Hersan is an artist from Brazil. He used to be an integrated circuit designer, and today he works with education, communication, and art. He was part of Astro Vandalistas, a collective that used technology, art, and activism to expand the possibilities of effective communication. Hi, Thiago.
Hello.
So going to Yuki Kobayashi, he's a visual artist and performance artist from Japan, and uses his own body to explore the neutrality of gender, racial stereotypes, looking into human relations, the resonance between restriction and fluidity in time and space. And Kobayashi started his career as a tennis player when he was in his teens, and he moved to the UK to start his career as an artist later. Hi, Yuki. Going to the third artist who created an artwork for Embodied interface, it's Ronald. He's a Netherlands-based visual artist, mainly focusing on live art, storytelling, installation, and lens-based media. His work deals with distance and proximity in intimate systems and natural events. Inspired by social exchange, cyborg history, and ecology in the field of anthropology, he's currently focusing on the organic body and the digital text. Brian Mackern, who's also here with us, and we have had some talks that you can also look at in our YouTube. He's an artist from Uruguay, and since 1995, he has been a developer and designer of web-based digital and hybrid art projects. He's also a musician, a composer of structures and self-generating reactive sound environments. Brian has created the net.art Latino database that you will also see the link. That is a hand-coded text-only website containing hundreds of links to net artworks from artists in Latin America, as well as related online discussions and criticism. So we really encourage you to navigate the database as well. Ćosić, he's a cosmopolitan retired artist with Balkan roots. He's one of the pioneers of net art and a hacker of ideas, totally incapable of showing reverence towards the formalities of the art world. Also joining us and who has been part of our research is Rok Kranjc. He's a researcher and translator in the fields of political ecology and degrowth, acting researcher, coordinator at the Peer-to-Peer Foundation, and future process designer at the Future Craft. He designs games and platforms for develop critical public discourses around sustainability, social justice and alternative economies. And finally, we have a special guest with us, Sheng-Wen LO. Hi, Sheng, thanks for joining. He's also an artist from Taiwan, and his work investigates the relationships between non-humans and contemporary society, often taking daily experiences as points of departures. So without any other formal introduction, we will now share the performances, and then we will have the time for the discussions. First, I will present the work by Thiago Hersan, Other Networks, Other Intimacies. So for you to know, it's a video pre-recorded that lasts 20 minutes.
Daniela, please open your sound. Thank you.
Hello everybody, thanks for coming. My name is Thiago, and I'm going to talk today a little bit about networks and intimacies on networks. But before we talk about those projects, I just wanted to introduce myself briefly by showing some other projects to contextualize some of what I'm going to talk about. Does anybody know what this is? Or this? So that's what's inside of these microchips or integrated circuits. And that's what I did. That's what I studied in university. Then that's what I worked on after I graduated. I was a circuit designer for a couple of years. And what was interesting about studying this when I did is that when I started studying engineering, computer engineering and computer science, the internet looked like this and like this. But in our heads, it felt like this. It was this wide open space of exploration, of learning, of building, of meeting people like you. It was a time where using the internet and programming the internet were pretty much the same thing. But by the time I finished studying, this is what a lot of the internet looked like. It's just these boxes, these predetermined forms, predetermined questions. There's almost like predetermined reasons for these questions to be asked. And besides being boring, it was kind of a disappointment. So I think a lot of the projects that I'm going to talk about, or at least some of the projects that I'm going to talk about, were initially motivated by this tension of what a network like the internet could have been and what it becomes once it grows the way that it has. So a first project kind of motivated by this desire to continue using the networks in a more personal or effective way was Babbler, which is an Android app. And what this app did was it turned text into the purposefully distorted images of text, like the CAPTCHAs that websites use to make sure that you're human. So you write a little message, it generates an image of that message, And the idea is that if you use this image on email or social media, the algorithms can't read these, because the point of the CAPTCHA is that only humans can read them. So this was just a quick project I did with a friend. And an interesting thing about this project is that a couple of years ago, I went on the Google Market app place to look at stats, and it has been downloaded mostly in the US, in Brazil, in India, which makes sense, but also Iraq. No idea why. And so another project along similar lines is I Like You on Facebook, which explores the idea of what is love if not the sum of all likes. What this app or script does is that when you go on this website and you log into Facebook, you see a list of all your contacts or your friends, and when you select one, the app goes through and likes every single thing that that person has ever said, every image that they're on, every text that they're tagged on, and while it does that, you sit there and wait, and you see the script kind of progressing. So, and of course I got kicked out of Facebook for this. They don't want to do that. They much rather know exactly what you really like or don't like. They don't want you messing up their algorithms. They let me back in later. And eventually they also changed how these apps are programmed, so something like this would not be able to happen today. Like you're not allowed, or you don't have access to other people's like buttons in an automated way like this anymore. In a way, this is a project where I try to play with the limits of what these websites or this internet, what they give us now. Try to push on them a little bit, and if I can do something outside of the internet, why can't I do it on the internet? And I did another couple of projects along similar lines, and you can check them out on my website. But another thing that happened around the same time that I was doing that, I met some other people that had some similar questions and anxieties about, the internet as we knew it. And so together we created or formed a collective called the Astrovandalistas Collective. And what we wanted to do initially in our project was to create new input or output interfaces for the networks that we already used. So SMS networks or phone networks or the internet. So the project that best exemplifies this is the Arma Sonora Telemática. And this was our attempt to transform sort of virtual digital protests into something physical and analog. We participated in an event at a cultural center that was across the street from an army base. And at the time, the army base was the target of complaints and protests, including some very popular hashtags on Twitter. And so we modified the structure that we found near this army base, and included these metal curtains around the already metal structure and attached them to a washing machine motor. So every time a protest hashtag appeared on Twitter, every time it was used on a message, on a tweet, the motor was activated and this structure banged, so it made a lot of noise. So this was our way of extending the interfaces that are given to us by these networks and create something a little bit more effective or personal and meaningful. And we also did some other projects kind of like this that you can see on our website, where we try to extend the interfaces and the networks that are given to us or that are common on the internet. But along the years, while doing these projects, while trying to use these networks, a couple of things happened. One of them was Snowden. So we already knew this or suspected, but this guy really showed us exactly the depth of the entanglement between these companies and governments and spy agencies. And at the same time, pop culture promoting this idea of the internet as the cloud, as this weightless thing that hovers above us and just shines down happiness. While in reality, the internet is very much physical. This is a map of underwater cables that connect different countries. And this is part of the infrastructure of the internet. This is what a cross-section of one of these cables looks like. And the internet is nothing but other people's computers. So this is a picture of a data center, and each one of these shelves, and there must be 20 shelves per column, but each shelf probably has 10 to 15 hard drives. And this is more of the infrastructure that's needed to keep this running. This is probably to distribute energy or water to cool down the circuits. And so, given the size, the magnitude, the materiality of these networks and these companies, both within the collective and personally beyond the collective, we were coming to terms with these limits of using other people's networks. So when we learned that NASA has a couple of projects where they use lasers to transmit data across large distances, of course we wanted to make our own laser modem to transmit data, and in this way create our own infrastructure for different types of networks. And when we were invited to participate in an exhibition along the border between Mexico and the US, in El Paso and Juarez, we wanted to build a couple of these laser modems and distribute them along the region so that people would have a very private network to transmit data. And we did do that, sort of. We built prototypes for these transmission and reception circuits. This is one of them, and it does transmit information to about 800 meters at dial-up modem speeds. But while we were there and working with different groups that wanted to be part of this network, we realized that this kind of data transmission was not that important or necessary for these groups involved, that transmitting short messages across the border is pretty easy with the technology that is present there. And so we noticed that what was actually important for people in the groups that we were working with was a kind of communication with the future, or a kind of communication that has more duration, that lasts for a longer period of time. And so using lasers, but a different kind of laser, we modified a laser cutting machine, and we created a interface to turn text messages into images. So that messages can be written on rocks and then transferred across the border. So during some workshops with these groups, we came up with short predictions for the future, or short phrases that express their worries for the future, and engraved those onto rocks that could then be traded across the border. And these are images of some of the places where the rocks ended up going to. And while the rocks do contain text messages that can be decoded and understood, the real network here was created between the people involved, who had to coordinate with themselves to exchange the rocks and transfer them from one side of the border to the other and make them go where they wanted them to go. And so while looking at space and stars. This project made me personally want to start to look at other kinds of these technological networks and communication networks that are already around us. So I started researching a little bit into satellites and different types of electromagnetic transmissions. And this is a representation or drawing of all the satellites that orbit the Earth. And this is a graph of all of the signals that I receive in my house. Well, not all, but kind of between 100 megahertz and 2500 megahertz. So here I set up a little antenna and a receiver in my room and picked up random signals for a couple of minutes, and I can kind of see where the more popular ones are, like FMTV and GSM, 3G, Wi-Fi. There are some here that I don't know exactly what they are. And one thing that the variety of signals made me think about is that so each one of these frequencies will require a very specifically sized and shaped antenna to transmit and receive that signal. And this is also a very physical kind of negotiation where metals of specific sizes resonate at specific frequencies. So in a kind of curiosity about, well, what kinds of signals would my body be sensitive to if I considered my fingers as antennas? So I started making a collection of wearable antenna, kind of jewelry, where the pieces of metal on these jewelries are based on the sizes and shapes of my finger joints. By making these antenna jewelry pieces that are based on my finger sizes, I'm doing two things. One, trying to measure the types of signals that my fingers are sensitive to. And two, if someone else wears these, it can create a kind of symbolic connection where they also become sensitive to the signals that my fingers are sensitive to. And so, for example, after connecting these to a circuit and doing some measurements, I can see that this one is sensitive to 1400 and 1970 megahertz. And this one has sensitivity peaks at 790 and 1300 megahertz. And while the antenna jewelry is a way to make sense of some of the signals that we swim in, one part of the spectrum is very much known to us and very much utilized every day. And that's the 2.4 gigahertz part of the spectrum where a lot of our Wi-Fi signals will be transmitted. And in an attempt to occupy that space or to connect to these signals that are already in that space, I started making these objects. So each one of these pyramids has receiver and transmitter circuit, and each one of these circuits is also programmed with a different type of algorithm. And overall, what these pyramids do is that they listen to specific channels of Wi-Fi and they capture the data being transmitted and then retransmit it, but using their own logic. And so they don't affect the transmissions that are already happening. They don't hack anything. They don't decrypt anything. They just capture the zeros and ones, which are floating all around them. And then they reorganize these zeros and ones using the specific algorithms that they're programmed with. In a way, it's kind of like a purifying of the Wi-Fi space. So they transmit a more organized stream of zeros and ones on top of the disorganized multitude of zeros and ones that are floating around them. And these are little visualizer screens that show For example, the white one is the signals, the original signals on some given Wi-Fi channel. The red one is what one of the pyramids retransmits after organizing it. And the blue one, as you can kind of see, organizes the data that it receives in a kind of increasing and decreasing order before it retransmits it. So these are just visualizers for what the pyramids either receive or transmit. And as I finish these objects, my original intent was to set up maybe a pop-up shop somewhere and sell them in a kind of performative way where I do some kind of reading with the person that wants to buy one of them and try to figure out what is the best antenna ring for them or the best algorithm pyramid for them. But given the current pandemic situation, I'm not able to do that in person, so I set up a website to sell these objects. And the prices for each of these objects on the website is actually dynamic. So the object itself helps determine its own price. So if a pyramid is not seeing the signals that it wants to see, or it has poor reception, or if an antenna ring is not seeing the signal of which it is more sensitive to, their prices will drop, almost as a way to show a kind of desire that they have to go somewhere else. And besides the objects themselves, my body also determines their prices, given the pandemic context in which this was created. The prices are also affected by my body temperature and my heartbeat rate. In case I get a fever or when I become more anxious and my heartbeat goes up, that drives the prices of the objects up as well. So this is what this jewelry is. It actually holds the heartbeat sensor on my fingertip, and I have a temperature sensor under my arm, and the graphs that you're seeing on the screen, one corresponds to my heartbeat, another to my temperature, and another is Wi-Fi channel 1 signals. And then on the website, you can see a history of the prices of each object. And my plan for this website is to actually expand it and invite other artists to showcase their objects or products in it, as long as they also are willing to connect their bodies to the pricing system of the website. And to me, these projects are a way to explore or become more sensitive to these hybrid networks that we're a part of. And they present ways for us to start to try to resensitize ourselves to the different signals and the different actors that are part of these networks. In a world where a virus is not just a biological issue, but also an economic, a political, a social issue, it's important for us to try to understand and become more aware of the different networks that we're a part of. And at the same time, it's just as important to come up with new ways to connect to these networks or to responsibly create new networks where we can more meaningfully participate. Thank you.
So thank you. That was the artwork and in form of lecture performance of Thiago Hersan. We have also shared the website of the e-commerce that he mentions at the end of the video in the chat section of the Zoom. And now we will move to Ronald Ball's performance called Catalysis.
Action.
So that was Catalysis, pre-recorded performance by Ronald. And finally, we will now leave the place to Yuki Kobayashi, who will do the live performance, I or Another. So for this performance, we want to tell you briefly some instructions. Yuki will share his screen. And so we will see a video that Yuki shares, but we will also be able to see Yuki's body. So we recommend you that while you were in the window that you see Yuki's body, you can move that window around, make it larger, make it smaller. If you're connected with a mobile phone, you can use your fingers to make also the window where you see Yuki's body bigger or smaller. So Yuki will also share the instructions written, but so that you have the experience and the possibility to somehow interact. Okay, thank you very much, Yuki. We will, as Yuki also finishes and prepares again to come back, we will go now to the third and last part of our meeting, which is the questions and sort of discussion with the artists. So we thought we would first talk a little bit about the three pieces that we saw, the two videos, one from Thiago and Ronald and Yuki's performance. And then we would move to talk as well with Vuk and Brian maybe more strictly about net art, but we also want it to be more like a smooth discussion. And if you want to add any questions, please feel free. After we have this discussion that Xianyun and myself, we have some questions for the artists. Please, if you, as the audience has any question, put it in the chat, or if you also want to say it out loud, please, you can unmute yourself. So we thought of starting with one question for Yuki, as it is the last performance that we saw. Yuki, I'm not sure if you're there. Yeah? I'm sorry we didn't give you more time to finish, but we just wanted to ask you, since you're mainly doing performances in physical spaces, we wonder how the research or the conversations we had more about net art inspired your work, and how has been this process of creating within the limitations of having to perform for a device, for a computer, and attaching in a way different devices has sort of affected your artistic decisions.
Okay. I wore the other way around. It's okay. Yeah, your question. Yeah. Yeah, actually, yeah, as you said, like I was really like a physical person. Like I was performing with really my body and physicality, and also I was more focused on like the liveness with the audiences as well. And also like I founded my performance art platform in Tokyo since 2019. That was more like we were like experimenting and discussing what is live performances for now. And since that platform, like I was really thinking about liveness and also like sharing lots of different backgrounds with using physicality in a performance art. And also, yeah, then since yeah, the COVID-19 is spread like from last year, then like also like I wanted to also open the platform again last year too, but like since the COVID was happened, like the performance is one of the most like restricted medium that maybe I also thought maybe I won't be able to do that again, like in the future, something like that. But maybe something, yeah, I wanted to do is like maybe if I do something physical performances last year, even only once, maybe it would be once with lots of performance artists in Tokyo we gathered. Then I know it was quite risky, but like if we did that, I think it would be really nice to looking back as a history, maybe after 10 or 20 years later. That's why we did it. And also that platform, we thought what is coexistence and also like codependence of like digital real, like the online platform, and also liveness. What is the definition that we actually have to think, or like what changed the definition of liveness since 2020 to now? Like I knew that like some platform was happened already, like before the COVID already, like on the online platform for the performance, but like I couldn't really engage with that because I was more focused on the liveness with the audiences in front of me. And yeah, and Yeah, since last year, like lots of people like shifting or moving to like performing in online or like this screen. And I couldn't really kind of shifting right away because like it was not really my things that I used to do as a performance artist. And I was really thinking, and also like at the same time, I thought maybe I couldn't avoid it because like this technology and the digital things is like already part of our life, and also like maybe part of my body, like using laptop or smartphone as well in my daily life. So like I was really thinking, what if I can perform for online? Maybe I should take more time to think what is this practice like expanding from my practice that I used to do. And also like I wanted to kind of enjoy this platform and this screenness extending from my practice. And I think it was really, really good challenge for myself to think about this, how to say, like two devices with my body as a tool and also technology. Because yeah, like in history, maybe performance artists, lots of people like try to kind of break the walls between artist and space and audiences, like this distance. But now I think this couple of years, maybe I thought maybe I have to think this breaking the boundaries of artist here and also audiences like behind the screens or like this invisible people. So like this is maybe now I have to think like with these two devices, like how can we kind of access and making distance more closer and closer with me and audiences, like through this screen. It's like it's not connecting, but it's kind of connecting. So like how can we get more closer to closer, or like how can we kind of share the temperature, as you said, and Thiago said, how can we kind of share the temperature together with us? This is maybe my shifting, like of how to say, my practice since I met Daniela and Sheng-Wen and also everyone here. So that's why I'm really kind of appreciating that, like you guys kind of inviting me to kind of try these things. Then like I found this like a sperms is also like part of my body inside, and it's really unconsciously there performing already instead of me as a body. So that's like I kind of started to kind of practice with my sperms, like how they are moving like unconsciously from my mind, but they are still me, but like they have a kind of a chance to be someone else maybe later, like after get outside of my outside. So that was kind of, and also it actually exists in live because I was projecting in live on my smartphone, but they are still kind of, it is kind of invisible with my eyes, but like they are kind of, once they project it on smartphone and the screens, like it appears and they are still live instead of me. So like kind of I felt connection between my body and the screen and audiences. So that's maybe that was my shifting, I think, and I'm quite enjoyed to kind of trying these things furthermore, maybe later. Yeah, that was my shift, I think.
Thank you so much, Yuki.
Oh,
I would just
long, yeah.
No, it's perfect. I want just to add the comment that because we haven't actually shared with you the statement or description of the artwork as it is in our website, but what Yuki showed also while he was sharing the screen are his sperms performing. So that was like a magnifying glass where he put the sperms, and we could see that they are still, they were dying as we saw them. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, one thing, like if the audience you would like to ask question, you can already start to write your question in the chat box, and after this discussion, we will pick some questions and answer. And you can write in Chinese, Spanish, and English.
Japanese too, maybe.
Yeah.
Japanese and Yuki can help us translate. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, like after the performance, maybe I'm sorry if you guys couldn't see really. So this is kind of the leftover, the performance is like, and I wanted to kind of also make something that I can leave after the performances. So like it's gonna be really hard, and so it becomes kind of like a portrait of myself, but also like it could be someone else's portrait as well. Yeah. So yeah, there are some photos, and also I tried this with live performances already last year. So like I have some photos on website, so maybe you can also see it. And also I edited like a film really short, so you can also see that too.
Yeah, thanks, Yuki. But also for us in within this project and with these artworks, it was very important Yuki's contribution when also offering to do a live performance. So it gave like a nice diversity between the pre-recorded performance, Thiago's performance, and yours. So we thought it would be like a nice diversity. So shifting to Ronald, we had some question for you. If you could tell us and the audience about the process of translating the images and shapes from your body, from inside your body, into these ceramics and objects that you interact with. This a little bit as well as to like expand a little bit on the process that you have been developing during the residency and to finish in this video and performance.
Yeah, so I hope you can see me also. Just a sec. Maybe this is easier. So what I did was I was quite interested in how things are developing now, especially if you compare digital art or digital systems and biological systems. So bioart and digital art or net art is coming closer together. And for me, this was quite an interesting development, or also we don't know, at least I don't know where it's going to. So what I wanted to do was taking something that is biology, like a physical body, like my own body, and putting it in CT scans, so making it digital and then transforming it to another natural object. And that was the ceramics, the objects that you saw. But it also has a different relation between having something 3D, moving it into 2D and making it into 3D again. And in the end, you saw the pre-performance, which is also a 2D image. But the interesting, so during the residency, I created these ceramic objects, and we started also with this project. And the idea of having a material, because digital emails, everything goes very quickly. It's like almost in real time. But if you look at ceramics is something that goes very slow. It's one of the oldest art forms we know, and it's also developing very slowly. It's just for the people who know ceramics a bit, you see that it's still in the idea of creating pottery, which is of course a performative medium or object. And it slowly moves to other forms. So I thought, how can I at least create something that is more in a performative object and can be used as a performance as well. And the third, or the last thing that I thought was interesting is first, but also I printed most of the objects. So all the CT scans are what you saw in the beginning were these were the images of the CT scans, and it's layered, so they're on top of each other, and that's how the computer, of course, makes these 3D models. And this is what you saw of the kidney and the brain. Also, I did the heart and so on. Yeah, this, for me, it was also interesting how we create mediums that now we can use very quickly as a that's the idea that CT scans or the inner body becomes much more public in a way that you have portable MRI scans, and so the also in that sense the medium of medical instruments become much more available to us normal artists or other people. Is that an answer to your question?
Yes, of course, thanks. We thought it was interesting in a way to share a little bit of what we have already discussed and seen through the process, and it's also related to you, what we were saying with Yuki, that in a way you're also like performing with what's inside your body and we cannot see without these devices. And of course, this was one of the relations and articulations that we were discussing with in our meetings, and also with Thiago, that I moved now to Thiago, that we were talking about these possibilities of showing or making more visible the links that are among the devices and our bodies, right? Also from that sort of question comes the idea of the name of the project, Embodied Interface. But in relation to what we saw of the video from Thiago, that also we discussed this possibility of doing like a lecture performance and so on. So, which this is, I think, for Thiago, this is something different that you have related to what you have done in the past. But we were interested in this that you mentioned about the physical infrastructure and materiality of the internet. And that we also encountered that you intend to make visible, as I said before, the signals that we interact or with which we are coexisting with. And if you could expand a little bit more on this and how, in a way, like the art field makes it more possible, or how do you feel in relation to the art world to talk about this or to create in relation to this? I hope it's clear.
Yeah. So a couple of thoughts that beyond making like visible some of this stuff, making it felt as well, or make it so that we can use it. So almost like we used to look at stars to guide us, you know, now we have all these other signals and we can think of it as another kind of constellation. And what does that mean to like our bodies, and can we use it to navigate, to some meaning of navigation, you know? Maybe it means like, oh, finding a place where my body is happy with the signals that are around it, or a way that I can use the stuff that's around to create some meaning, or to create some understanding of my surrounding. So really with this reference to like navigation instruments is a kind of a next step. And then in terms of some other embodiment or materiality, taking some of the stuff that we've learned in this experiment that is the internet. So like how our addictions are shaped and our, you know, these desires. And so can we do that in the real world? So in the internet, I go and I can like 100 things in a minute, you know, or more. If that's something that we as humans need to have these kinds of feedback or how do you say it? Not justifications, but reinforcements, you know, from our peers. Are we going to start doing that outside the internet? Can we do that outside the internet? So, you know, go around and liking stuff. And like I have this one project where I send a rubber stamp of my lips to people far away. So it's a way to me being active with a lot of them at the same time, which is something I learned from the internet, right? Like I can do this. It doesn't cost anything to like stuff. And with this rubber stamp, it's like oh, it doesn't cost anything for me to kiss people. And so these two kind of things, I think, are part of what I'm doing in some ways with these projects. And doing this in like art contexts is interesting, is important, and might not be the only, you know, places where this happens, but it definitely has a lot of permeability, right? So it's places where I can mix and learn about not just art, but then like philosophy and design, history, anthropology, which I think is necessary to even understand some, you know, some of these contemporary issues. Like we can't just keep saying, oh yes, you know, computer stuff is for the computer scientists and biology is for the biologists. I think just as a general way to guide ourselves politically and socially, we have to be more multi. And so at least like art is one place where that tends to happen, in some places sometimes. So is where I situate it. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, for us, we were also having those discussions because one of the person who has helped us with the research as well is Rok, who he's more from the sociology field, and we were having all these discussions whether it is possible to talk about the things that we talk within arts in relation to other fields and what's the importance of that. And through this project, I think that one of our aims was also to be able to put that in a way all together, although we are very clear that we're working within the artistic field, right? But to make that connections possible. And I think that also the video that we shared from you, Thiago, has been important to give more of a context and to give more actual information about the internet and the artistic possibilities and also collective possibilities within that. And now moving a little bit to talking with Brian and Vuk, which are here with us because we first of all, we talk with them in relation strictly to net.art, but they are both artists who are still active, although Vuk says he's a retired artist, but in a way, he's still creating art all the time in an expanded way as well. But for Brian, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about, from the perspective of your contemporary practice, which questions or explorations that were important for you when doing net.art do you think are still active and are still happening all the time within the art practice?
Yeah, first of all, I have to congratulate you about the selection and curation. The three pieces I saw were wonderful because they cover up a huge scape, of possibilities and approaches. So thank you for that. There's three different examples and wonderful examples. I send my regards and a hug to Thiago, my friend.
Thanks, Brian.
No, thanks to you. And well, I think the spirit of the thing it continues, from the 90s to today. In my actual practice, I don't work now with net.art per se, it's like I don't call it more net.art, And I think that the big difference is about the relationship we had in the 90s with these new technologies and this medium, that we were like a part. We came from the physical world, and then came this new medium that it was intangible, and it involves lots of invisible processes that, well, Thiago talked about it today. And now we're in an immersive situation, it's we almost that can't separate the two lives, We have one immersive life in which the physical world and the virtual world clashes and dialogues, you know. So I think the spirit is, yeah, it continues being the same, but the means of production are becoming different. From the discourse of net.art, I think they disseminate a lot, you know, because now you can call memetics like net.art also, you know. There are lots of popular ways of expressing critics or being ironic or etc. that they are not called art, you know. It democratized, you know. It got like in an immersive
Spread,
way
yeah.
also. Yeah, it spread. That's the term. In an immersive way. So there's no separation, and it was a bit of the discourse of the vanguardists in last century, you know, about this dissemination of creative ideas and that anyone could be an artist. And then if that goes on and on and on, maybe the term art would lose sense in a way, you know. And I think for now, like the only people that want to maintain the term art is the system, the you know, the sales system of the art, you know, of the art system. But yes, there are lots. For example, Thiago, that he told us about working with communities, and you know, you spread this knowledge and this way of reflecting in processes that are underlying of what you perceive and what you send. You know, these invisible processes, and then you don't know in those communities which spark, you know, will ignite a brain, and an artist could appear, you know, from many different disciplines. And so yes, in short, I think the spirit is the same, you know.
Yeah.
Thanks.
No, thank you. And it's also because when we were sharing this event, it happens that it seems like very specific, like we're talking only about net art, but as we were doing more research and getting closer in a way to the artists, to the terms with Xianyun, we realized that it's, and that's why we also included a part in our YouTube of talking about collective action and also low tech, etc. But it's mainly about working in a network and using internet as one other tool that allows us to get in touch with more potentials and of course more limits, but it's very related to all this spirit that you mentioned, that we can go back in like to the beginning of the 20th century, etc., etc. So, and this is something that we also talked about with Vuk, I believe, and but we also wanted to bring into the conversation that you also work and you're educated as an archaeologist, and that you have like this, you in a way you wear many hats within your practice. And so we were wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what's your current interest as for thinking or working with and through networks, like in this connected and collective way.
Hi, everybody. I really have to, first I have to share with you a formal, what's that word, a remark that it is really not fair that I didn't get the same question as Brian, and it's also
But you can answer that one as well.
And it's also not fair that he gave you exactly the same answer I would. So thank you, Brian. As you can see, us older people, we go to the same hairdressers, but it's not just on top of the head, it's also inside that we are brothers, even at a distance. Yes, what you ask definitely is in deep connection with the nature of the entire project, as I see it. And that is the fundamental question whether the networked work that we used to do in the 90s and the nature of internet connectivity, connectedness, is somehow becoming a fundamental infrastructure even without the internet itself, whether we have discovered or conquered some new deep and meaningful way to mutate with a the fundamental creative act. That was the central dilemma, one of the few central dilemmas we had in the 90s with the net.art thing that you correctly mentioned in past tense. I'm not like these old punk musicians that still, insist on that. Just like Brian was implying, we're, not stuck in the 90s that much. But this avant-gardist principle, I believe, is essential. Our job is to spread the virus of freedom. If I may use the virus metaphor, you guys are all into bodies and all that sleazy stuff. So I think this makes my declarations closer to you. I believe that is what is really meaningful. Now, in my own work, like you said, yes, it's unfortunate. I tend to have a fluid identity. I do different things. Some of them is commercial even, but I share and I bring in the knowledge and the experiences from the net.art stage, let's say. So right now I'm, for instance, yesterday the police has emptied a social center here, an artistic and social center. So we are organizing protests and we're doing some fantastic old school vandalism right now around town with spray cans. For me, that is right now more meaningful than the position of net.art in the overall history of art and of the human thought in the 20th and 21st century. So I'm allowing myself the freedom to be like that, proverbial butterfly that just goes around from topic to topic, regardless of the careeristic consequences. And yes, the luggage I carry is the deep awareness of the value of collaboration and which always implies sacrifice of ego a little bit, but brings fantastic consequences down the road and joy. And when you come to my senior citizens age of 50 plus, you start valuing all these things much more than you maybe did at the younger age. And so I'm getting what's that expression? I'm getting confirmations on the inside. It's not the size of the crowd at the inauguration that matters, if I may paraphrase our dear deceased Donald Trump. It's not about the size of the crowd. It's about other values, and this is a beautiful confirmation for me. There you go.
Thank you. Yeah, and in a way you have somehow answered, but our other question was if it's still interesting for you to be invited to sort of these kind of events because of your experience with net.art and your practice with net.art. And we find it somehow paradoxically, and because of this also very part of your way of moving, that it's paradoxic that you're all the time mentioned because of an art that you as well consider to be dead. So if you wanted to tell us a little bit about this.
Like I usually repeat in such circumstances, I'm like, Jimi Hendrix that failed to overdose. My generation, guys of my generation, we have done our shit at that time, made a lot of sense, and we intended to move on, but the overall system, just like Brian was saying, the system defines you. It's not about what you want to do or how do you want to position yourself. It's about how the context is telling you you should stay positioned. So sometimes I feel like this musician that goes around the world and is always asked to play the songs from the first album. That is a little bit insulting for me. I really have, I want to talk about new shit, but no, you see, that thing you did in '96 was so cool. Would you please be kind enough to, give us that piece for the show? and I am a conformist, of course, to some extent. So I do accept these invites. But situations like this one, that is not just a display and money and media. Situations like this one, where there is some basic exchange, are more powerful and make more sense. So this is not me in some oversight function, like control and command function of some old ideas from 25 years ago, but it is in a way nostalgic. Of the three young artists that I saw now, Thiago's work was most close to, let's say, my particular field, closest to my personal sensitivities. And for me, it was like a time machine, also in a way, like, oh man, yeah, sure, I know exactly the emotion, I know the approach, I know the desire, I know the entire passion, the passion thing. The other two things are fantastically serious at the same time, but simply as from my sensitivities, this was like a trip down the memory lane. So I'm always grateful. I always do this. I like it. Keeps me young. Oh.
Okay, thank you so much, Book. While we make some other questions to the other members of our group, we were wondering if people has questions. I see we have some in the chat, and yeah, you just leave them there, and we will give the voice to the artists in a while.
Yeah, in relation to we invited some artists who were working more on their body and physical performance. Yeah, because we were thinking like, what are the relationship between technological device and physical body? That because we are almost using internet every day, working and entertaining. That's why we really want to invite like some artists that are not doing like new media art, but working on their body and see how this affect. So I have a question maybe both for Ronald and Yuki, because I know you both have a lot of experience in making like durational performance. And we know that some durational performance consists of really subtle movements and seemingly like repeated actions. And it usually happens in physical space. And I was wondering, after you perform online, do you have some like ideas about the difference between performing online and offline, or what's your like perspective streaming a durational performance or performance in general and put it into a digital domain? Maybe like Yuki, you want to answer first? You can open the sound. Yeah.
Yeah, after the difference online and offline performances, yeah, definitely, it was definitely different because I couldn't see anyone, the audiences, I couldn't see any reactions at all. So like, it was the most different things for me. Well, apart from that, like I was just focusing on myself and creating my atmosphere by myself. So it didn't really have the big difference like for myself, but the reaction, I didn't really see anything. So like, yeah, so as I actually wrote a text like on the website, that like in the beginning, like, I on the Zoom as well, like talking like this or like performing with invisible audiences, I felt like just like how to say, like watching pornography or something, like, or like kind of live camera kind of something like that. So it's kind of I felt really emptiness quite a lot, like even after like finish the conversation or after finish the performance, like I felt really kind of still like empty, like how was it, like what was that, like was it really like real, like did we really like see each other just now? Like I see, of course, everyone, but like it was kind of like still for me, like unsafe. Like someone might be kind of recording me like without knowing anything, or like kind of like doing something just behind the cameras, or like around here, or like, so like, yeah, it's like how much like I trust, maybe, I don't know, like yeah, because it's a bit strange, because when I perform here, like performances are more like it was avant-garde, but nowadays I think performance is really institutional, and like I can perform in the museums or like galleries, like those kind of protected space, I think. So that's like when I perform there, I feel kind of also safetyness as well. But like performing here or like something like online, it's like seems like it's quite kind of private, or like it's protected maybe, but also like I feel like still kind of not really safe somehow, like because I don't really see the people watching me. So this is the maybe difference, this like fear, or like a little kind of small afraid of being watched, or like being performing. But maybe I'm kind of maybe, yeah, it was last year, but like now maybe kind of I kind of getting used to this, but still kind of not really fitting yet. So like I think I need more experiences, but I think that was the quite difference for me. Yeah.
So it's the lack of the presence of your body, and also the feeling of insecurity.
Yeah, the presence. Yeah, insecure. Yes, of course. Yeah, it's that was the really big difference. Yes.
Yeah. If Ronald, you want to add something?
Yeah, I was thinking a lot about these questions also in relation to, if you compare it, for example, in theater, you have the stage, and it is an empty stage, but it, like we talked today, it's also framed. It has a certain height, it has a certain space where you can walk, and at the same time, you can see, I think, if you compare this to internet, it also has a space where you can add something, and definitely a frame. But in the same time, it's also in theater what you call the third wall. So you have this wall also in front of you, and this third wall becomes much more prominent in digital performances. And I think, for me at least, I don't have a really clear answer how to do this yet. This is also why I pre-recorded it, first of all, and because it's if you think about a film, you can also cut, add. It has in a way, the editing is a new performance in itself, and this is in live recording or in digital platforms. This is also a bit different. So I have no and you can interact in a way or respond. So for me, it's doing something live on internet is a very difficult question still. And I think Thiago has a nice answer to this, to use his body heat. And I think also what we talked about, community, is also a big importance that can have a more live it can be more visible also, but doing live performance like Yuki and I do a lot, it's very difficult for me at least to do this online. You hear it?
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks,
No,
Ronald.
could you repeat, please?
Shit.
I just want to bring some questions that have been posted in the chats, and for example, Mari Najem asks about female artists in relation, I guess that in relation to net.art, and thank you, Brian, for also including those names in the chat. This is something that we are very also conscious about, that in this session of the project, we have not included female artists, and this is, but we have went through discussions and research of various of those artworks that we included in our YouTube videos. Belén Gache is one of the artists from Argentina based in Spain as well. She was part of the Fin del Mundo collective from Argentina. And also Shu Li Chings, that I'm not pronouncing correctly. If you, can you say it, Xianyun? Shan Shu Li, yeah, from Taiwan. Which we have also revised Brandon, one of the very important also net.art's work, which it was also sort of important in relation of net artwork with institutions, as it was, if I don't remember wrong, it was financed by a museum since its beginning, this is also another topic that we're not touching now. And also we have included some research of Constanza Piña. She's an artist from Chile, also known as Corazón de Robota, and her artwork for us, and her practice is very important. Also in relation to something that Ronald and Thiago mentioned, that it's like technologies, like ancestral technologies. So when talking about technology, we didn't want to only focus on what we know now as computers, etc., these sort of devices. But Thiago's work and Constanza also help us to see how in other times these technologies, like Constanza was working with a quipu, which is a kind of textile, which she considers one of the first computers, as it was archiving information, a way to communicate through history and through space. So this consideration of technology in a more expanded way, it's also something that we want to, in a way, share through this project. And I leave also the room to Thiago and Brian or Vuk or whoever, if you want to expand a little bit on this. Thiago, I think this is also very an important part of your work.
Yeah, the part about ancestrality, you mean?
Yes.
It's somewhat of a serious joke, but you know, when we talk about all these, what we want to do with digital technologies, so like, oh, the internet and email and chat, and this is really in like virtual reality now, you know, this is really about being at multiple places at the same time, or being really far away, really fast, moving things at a distance, you know, and these are sometimes actions that some like ancient and even indigenous, you know, people could do with like herbs and hallucinations and things like this. So it's there's this almost a funny desire to complicate and create things that we already knew how to do before. And in some ways, the same with maybe not so ancient, with these like navigational technologies that we can get to places or can do stuff really objectively and really fast, but we're also taking our body out of it in a lot of ways, you know. So knowing what time it is and where I am, more than just objective questions, you know, once it gets into more like social, political, personal ramifications of what does it mean, like where I am and what time it is. and other, types of research, but putting our body into the, not necessarily at risk, but in the equation, so I see a connection with that too. So like with Constanza's work, doing calculations by actually weaving things, it's, part of not just getting to the answer, but the way you formulate the question and the answer and get there, and whether it's weaving or pointing your body to the stars, which I think is important for creating sensibilities, so we can ask and answer questions about, broader questions.
Yes, thank you.
May I please?
Sure.
This is becoming interesting. Thank you. I'm trying to figure out. Thiago mentioned something, and that is the way that people now make things complicated. And I was expecting the next sentence to be that the engineering minds of people working with big corporations work in such a way. And that simply reminded me of an observation that nowadays, in these last few years, we're talking again about artificial intelligence. We do this every 10 years for the last 60 years. It's normal. Don't worry. But we're talking about this shit again. And of course, everybody is discussing not the actual reality of artificial intelligence achievements or the laboratory experimentation, but people are talking about the imagined consequences that are being pushed forward by the vendors, by the businesses, by the companies that sell artificial intelligence solutions. We're not discussing the reality, we're discussing a fiction. And that reminds me of another paradox, that on one hand, we happen to be what falls in the category of critical media art. That is one of the labels I do accept. So we're supposed to be these artists that, just like Thiago has beautifully demonstrated, are reacting in a clever, fresh way to something that's like meteorology, like falling from the sky, some technology that comes from unknown direction. But the paradox is that most of that technology was inspired by artists from 2 generations ago, or 3 or 4. And so we're in some sort of a loop of fundamental imagination. We keep reimagining the same simple 2 or 3 basic ideals about time and space. Just like Thiago said, I'm sorry, I'm just giving the same thing in different words. I'm agreeing with him in a very loud way. I'm sorry if this is redundant, but these are important thoughts, I believe. They sit somewhere near the heart of my own personal preoccupations when I deal with this. And the first consequence is I get very easily bored with art that is reinvestigating the long discovered continents. Like, come on, not again. But on the other hand, there's always that expectation, wait. This crazy guy or female guy, I don't care, is maybe going to be articulating the same discovery that I know so well in such a new way that it might bring us to a next step. And I think this is how we move through time. The only problem is that we are not organized, we are not systematic people. Being artists, we are usually also what society calls crazy. And the other players in the same arena, being scientists and business interests, and others are better organized. So I hope we will still have a chance to put our little imagination in the big soup of global thought. Hopefully, we're not going to destroy ourselves in the process. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vuk, for that contribution. I mean, when I stick with the part that you said that also artists, or people related to the artwork, we are not systematic and so on, which makes me think in also the work that Brian did for the Latino database. And this is, for me, an example of a big contribution, because he was able to, by himself, and then with, I think you can expand on that, Brian, with the support of other people, to make this database and systematize all the information that was spread around in relation to net.art. So with this work, we can, thanks to that, we can now go through all these artworks that had been done at the moment. And although most of them maybe don't work anymore, but this is another aspect of net.art that I think it's also expressed in the texts that are part of the book, that the importance to relate also with these artworks in a way of allowing them to die at a moment. So Brian, if you want to tell us a little bit about this that we have already talked about, but I think it's important to mention again, what was the aim behind creating the database, and yet somehow the process.
Yes, well, I agree with what Thiago and Book said also. You know, it's not what, but how, and all the processes involved and the creative approaches on those processes, you know, that are amazing and never stop. And also the need to gather all this information, because there is a lot of redundance also, no? But well, anyway, the net.art Latino database, it's a community process, you know. It's, yeah, I did it, but with the help of all my tribe, you know, I always talk about the tribe that I find through internet, you know, people doing with the same interest as me, you know, and it was, of course, we all did net.art, but it was a more effective thing, you know, and that for me is the most important thing, you know, that this clashes of effectiveness, you know, in our relationship, that is more intellectual, you know, when you talk about things that my interest and how I do things, etc., etc. But there is always a building of a relationship. And first of all, the net.art Latino database is we had a huge mailing group, you know. At that time, there was, for example, well, Arcángel Constantini, Gustavo Romano, that he's from Fin del Mundo also, Jorge Aro, you know, from all the countries in South America. Andrés Burbano from Colombia, Lucas Bambosi from Brazil, you know, there are lots of super nice people and very intelligent people, artists and academics doing things at that time. And it was very easy for me, you know, when they appear for the first time, the books talking about the history of net.art, it was always a discourse built up from the north, you know. They were like from North America or European, you know, centered. And at the same time, or more or less, there were lots of people in other places of the world doing the same things. It's not that I intended to clash, but when these things appeared published, I said, okay, I will do this net.art Latino database. That, by the way, I will put in the chat a link to download it, the PDF of this book.
Thanks.
I think it, yeah, okay.
No, thanks for the link. I mean,
yeah,
you can
and the idea was, you know, in a very low-tech DIY thing with an ASCII art interface and with a South American map in an inverse way, you know, referring to Torres Garcia, that in the 40s he talked about that we need to change the north for the south. So we invert the maps. Now our south is the north. Like a change in a way of thinking things, no? Because South America was always very, well, it's a colonized region, you know? So we were very Eurocentric or North American centered, you know, in our minds and our cultural things that we consume, and how the ancestral knowledge go dissipated, you know, and now there are lots of artists like recovering this, you know, Constanza Pina with the quipus, but also Aruma, for example, from Bolivia, that she's working with textiles. Well, lot of people doing things. Andrés Urbano also, I think, did a work about ancestral things. But yes, you know, we are like a product of that colonization. Yeah, we're already mixed up, you know. So it's nice to recover these alternative histories, you know. No, but you know, yes, read the books available, all the books you want, but also we have this little history here, and if you are interested, you will arrive here. You know, for example, the Net Latino database was for years like a inside joke between the Latin American networks. You know, yeah, we have the Net Latino database, you know. And it's been like very few years that got other people got interest, because that now in the academic realm there is an interest arising in discovering new movements, you know? But it's a thing, you know, that happens, you know, it comes saturation, and then you need to go and see in other places what has has happened. No?
I think
But,
that it's something
yes,
that it's something that that people who start to research about net art and we want to know about what happened more in Latin America is something that's really appreciated from that research side as well. So yeah.
Yeah, I think in Taiwan we also share the same problem of post-colonialism, because we have been colonized by Japan and the Netherlands and Spain also. But and I think this also influenced a lot on our artworks, and also we have lots of artists based abroad as well. And like Sheng-Wen, he's now based in the Netherlands, and yeah, his works we feel like conceptually is in between the really physical performance art and like internet or new media art. So we are happy also to have him to join the discussion, and because he has done one like artwork is like he used a earphone that can hear ultrasound, and he wore that for a month and discussing the relationship between that and human beings. So is also part of this idea of embodied interface. So I would like to ask Shen that if you have any comments of the performance today, and also in relation to your own artwork, that you also connect your body to technological device and reflecting on environmental issues. Like it's in a broader sense, it's also related to embodied interface.
Well, thank you for having me. And I enjoy all the performance and work today. And it also made me realize something interesting that I have never thought of before. Like Yuki mentioned that he felt insecure when he's performing on a live stream where he cannot see the audience. It got me thinking that the relationship between the performer and the audience throughout history has not been evolving in a linear way. I mean, the relationship is always dynamic, and technology has always been a factor on how this relationship intertwine. For example, the concept of recording something does not exist until maybe the late 19th century. It was not possible to record anything before. So the performance which happens before that, maybe the artist has no intention to be recorded, but perhaps he or she has no chance to defy this technological trend that, in the future, all concerts or all music or all theatrical performances can be recorded. And if this concept is available in the 17th century, maybe all the composers will freak out or something like that. So perhaps we have, for me, it made me think that I should be more flexible in terms of how I perceive the relationship between artwork and the audience. For me, I have no idea how people in the next century or so, or the next 50 years, will experience the work that we are creating right now. Maybe some concept as groundbreaking as recording has yet to be discovered. So perhaps we can be more open about it and see what happens. So that is. I don't have a clear conclusion now, but that's just some thoughts that just came up in my mind. And what I see is that technology, in another aspect, has been empowering us to sense the world in many different ways, like Thiago's work using your body as an antenna, or pair an antenna with your body. You can suddenly perhaps be some kind of a cyborg, which can activate your world in a completely different way. And we have been using technology to activate the world in different way for a long time. For example, we wear glasses. That is a tool that allows us, or we can say that is a technology for us to enhance our visual abilities in daily life. And in the future, of course, I can almost expect that something even more powerful will happen. And even nowadays, that I think we can also say that the internet is also part of this evolvement, that we are looking at the world through internet, through our cell phones. It's no less critical than the glasses. I mean, that people are equipping themselves through different kinds of technologies, abstract and physical alike. But that also got me thinking that what about the rest of the world, the rest of the stuff that is not connected to these technologies? How do we? How can we come up with a way to coexist when the technology evolves? I mean, the non-humans are almost certainly always offline because they don't know how to use the internet. The plants or the animals or the rocks doesn't know how to use the internet. Are they excluded from the equation, or should we factor them in and perhaps imagine what it is like to be disconnected through these technologies? I mean, perhaps I think the imagination is the first step for us if we try to coexist with the rest of the world that is often, in hindsight, they are after all offline. and perhaps imagining this offline world is a way to break this abstraction, to the distance between us and the physical world, and perhaps that's the first step towards representing the offline world through this seemingly or inevitably human-centric biosphere, I think.
Yeah, great. I think really that imagination is also one of the really core value of art and our imagination of the world. And now I have one question to Rok, because we know that you know, in the early like net artworks, some of the artworks they want to have like anti-institutional potential and want to like distinct themselves outside like normal museums or commercial galleries. And that's also why we are including your research and profession in this talk, because you're mainly doing like design interactive online platforms, and also you worked in P2P foundation. So we are like wondering that if we expand this idea of net art into online platforms, and how do you like combining these problems of ecology and transition to alternative economies? And maybe it's also what Sheng-Wen is caring about, because his work is, you know, trying to include non-human inside the debate around technology.
Yeah, thank you. Again, it's a pleasure to be here. Yeah, I hope I don't disturb this thread that's building too much with my weird, unabashedly utopian impulses and ideas. And I have to say also that I don't necessarily have many designed platforms under my belt, but yeah, make up for it in a lot of thinking through and conceptualizing. And maybe I can share some of that in my response here. So yeah, I'm like as Sheng-Wen kind of indicated, I'm mainly interested in like designing or co-designing platforms as certain kinds of interventions. Essentially, I'm interested in designed interfaces for co-generating what we might call transformative knowledge commons, specifically related to post-capitalist alternatives, or you could say transitions, transformations toward a post-capitalist pluriverse. And yeah, within that, I'm kind of interested in how gamifying in a certain sense, or experientializing collaboratively created, curated databases of alternatives to capitalism could work out as a kind of practice. Alternatives, meaning like alternative futures, but also alternative presents, histories, or change pathways. But before I go maybe more into like maybe kinds of examples of this, I would also kind of highlight the discursive character of the struggle that you outlined, say like the climate crisis, transitioning to new economies and so forth. Because, well, at the everyday level, at the quote-unquote layman's kind of experience, this is not an essentially contested space, whereas it is essentially contested, right? We hear of, you know, different notions of quote-unquote sustainable development. These days we hear a lot about circular economy and so forth. And I think one major challenge is to identify and name particular imaginaries associated with these certain types of discourse and narratives around new economy. And yeah, through design interfaces, nurture and develop radically alternative ones, post-capitalist ones, if you will. So in a sense, it's my hope that actually highlighting this contested discursive nature of the problem itself, making this central to as a design principle of such platforms, can serve as a kind of hack, a workaround in terms of how power is usually developed through interaction between, say, hegemonic discourse and grassroots, say, counter discourses. So to augment that in a way, specifically through co-creating radical pre-experiences of alternatives as a kind of shared commons, as a knowledge commons, leveraging affordances of both online and physical spaces and specific interconnections that can be established between them. And this is whether through games or other types of online interactive platforms through which communities of practice could self-structure and generate these knowledge commons that would both embody but also support forms of counter power, of transformative power. And what I mean by transformative counter power in form is an open question for me, and very much importantly so. It's a potentiality, a possibility space, because in this kind of design, we're talking about designing specific modalities of change. So leveraging particular affordances of particular choices and polemics, design approaches, interfaces, and combinations of interfaces, including, as I said, hybrids of online and offline interaction, and creating virtuous cycles between those. One emphasis on also physical spaces because, well, say, generating nice stories around, radical alternatives, post-capitalist alternatives, etc., ways of doing and being. It might be a crucial first step in kind of deschooling, opening up the possibility space, but crucially, online interactions also need to funnel into other forms of praxis, including, I think, physical manifestations in public space. Like acting out the possible. One example that I could briefly outline here as a kind of concept, as I said, is so-called Four Futures Festival. Essentially, the idea is to have an open platform to share and generate elements of radical, say, utopian or utopian, as kind of real utopia thing, alternative, presents, histories, futures, pathways, but also critical dystopian ones, so kind of juxtaposing different futures, enabling people to generate and play with these futures, creatively combine them. And the point here is this kind of plurality of futures, which emphasizes our own agency in shaping them. So either through the idea here is leveraging the online for kind of collating, collaboratively curating this kind of insights, but then transposing that to the physical space, for example, in the shape of live action role-playing games. It can essentially be a performative gesture, but it's also a way of collaborative design as a transformative process, and also the concrete realization of actual, say, parallel political economic structures, perhaps. There's several challenges in this that I identify, not in the least of who wants to or is able to participate in the co-creation of such things, and also the kind of design approaches that one takes. Like, is it a build it and they will come kind of thing, or is it build it together and we're kind of already here together and doing it? Regardless, we could also speak of kind of fetishizing, quote unquote, co-design and co-creation. We also see a kind of co-optation of this narrative itself as well. So like maybe to end and to circle back, yeah, I think it's importantly a question of very specific design interfaces and this open question of the relation between knowledge commons and exercising a transformative counterpower.
Rok, that's tough shit. Are you going to be at the demonstrations tomorrow to fight the police with me, or talking about counterpower?
I'm in Taiwan.
Ah, tough. Wrong answer.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Rok. It was also helpful for us when speaking with Rok, looking at some of the examples of, for example, in Argentina, there's this collective called Iconoclasistas, and they work through collective mapping. And it was also a surprise for us to find that there are some research that they consider them as net artists, because they create networks and then they translate this to the online. Okay, but the core of their work is the work in the territories, is the work with the sharing knowledge with people and like mapping areas, mainly from Argentina, but they have been working across the continent and now also with Spain, mapping areas which haven't been mapped, and creating those maps from the experiences of the people who is living there, and facing those conditions. So this was also a nice example for us to discuss a little bit about the collective and collective work that has this very important part in the offline, but also the online sharing of these maps that they create are a strong part as well. And in a way, it also relates to what Rok was telling us about the possibilities of gaming and these encounters of exchange of knowledge. So, but we are already like 1 hour more than we should have been connected. Thank you all for staying there, most of the people. And if there are some other questions, please put them in the chat section. I also open up the room for any of you and the artists if you want to say some last comments, but we need to close in less than 10 minutes.
I'm perfectly happy. It's getting dark in Slovenia, so it's time to go to sleep and stuff like that. So this is very complete. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Also, just want to thank and say goodbye to everybody. We'll follow in traditional digital virtual discussions from now. So.
Yes, thank you all. And just to say again that this has been recorded and we will upload it in the YouTube channel for most of the people who wrote to me that they had to leave because it was too long. So you can finish to see the conversations in our YouTube channel. And as well, please text us if there are, because we have mentioned a lot of artists, a lot of researchers, and we hold most of that links and bibliography, so we are more than happy to share that information. It's also important for this project. So yeah, Xianyun, I'm not sure if there's anything else we should mention.
Yeah, we had this YouTube channel that we also have other presentation and talks inside, so about the discussion that you can also check. Yeah, so I guess thank you, thank you.
And we will stay in touch, yes, through the networks, of course.
Thank you. There will be consequences, I am sure.
There will be. Yeah.
I hope.
Thank you.
All right. See you.
Bye-bye.
I'm going to do some vandalism.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Yeah.
See you. Thanks for all.
Bye-bye.